Elden Ring hot takes. They're like assholes. Everyone's got one and they usually stink. Like this one. The game is too much of a copy-paste of Dark Souls 3 gameplay-wise. The lack of innovation when it comes to combat is supremely disappointing. With the unbelievable amount of additions that Elden Ring had, spirit summons, jumping attacks, guard counters, ashes of war, huge amounts of weapons, ability to dual-wield weapons, hidden posture meters, horse combat, open world exploration, and 5 times the normal size of a Souls game, do we really need to add Sekiro levels of redesigned combat to the mix? They threw in plenty to keep it fresh and new, but keep it similar enough to feel reminiscent of something great that we already love. I feel like complaining could be a profession for people who play video games, as sometimes it feels like they are more passionate about that than the games they say they love. The soundtrack is mediocre, except for Radagon/Elden Beast fights, especially in the open world. This one has 47 upvotes, and it might be the take that bothers me the most. I think people are overwhelmed by the sheer amount of content in this game that they just forget some of the absolute bangers. Like, sure, some of the open world music is fitting, atmospheric backdrop that isn't iconically memorable, but it's not supposed to be. How about these ones? Let's drag it for the sax. Or what about Godskin Duo? Godric needs a word with you, fool. And Moog's theme? And just below that tier, we have things like Malenia's Phase 2, Regal Ancestor Spirit, Godfrey, and Radahn. Like, what? Do you people have ears? The soundtrack is vastly superior to Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, Sekiro, and Dark Souls 2. It's at least in the same realm as Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, even though I can see the argument for it not being quite as strong as those. I've returned to the Elden Ring soundtracks more than perhaps any in the series because of their technical intricacy, unique and personalized quirks, and bombastic intrigue. I've made an entire video on the top soundtracks of the series, and let's just say Elden Ring has more than a couple entries. It's not 96 Metascore good. I agree, I was thinking more like 99 to 100 levels of good. Mimic isn't OP and never was. It was exactly what it was meant to be, and that's exactly why it was a decent way into the game. Bleed isn't OP either, it's just strong. Bloodhound Step isn't remotely OP or unfair because it doesn't outright win fights, it just prolongs them. Okay, there's so many takes in this that are just... okay. To be fair, this was a little while ago, so this was before the stuff was actually nerfed, 7 months ago. But if Mimic tier wasn't OP, then why did the developers feel the need to gut it? I mean, it's still useful, but why did they feel the need to nerf it so badly? Same with Bleed. And do you not realize that prolonging the fight for free with a button would make it OP? If I had a button that let me eat a star from Mario and be invincible for the next 10 seconds of a fight while I buffed up to head back into battle, and it had almost no cost, would that not be OP? Or is it not OP because it just delayed the fight? That doesn't even make sense. And also, Bloodhound Step was nerfed. So, the open world doesn't fit these games, and the story is not particularly interesting and feels too similar to Dark Souls. So the format of the game doesn't fit these games, meaning a Dark Souls-like game, but the story is too much like Dark Souls. Do you see the problem here? It's too similar, but also too different. I understand what he's trying to say, that the open world feels like they're trying to do something different for the sake of it, while the story feels copied and pasted. But I think where you find the real depth of Elden Ring's story is in the contrasts with the rest of the Souls series. Found within the main theme alone, we hear the triumph of a war cry, and this is the empowering thump of the story that keeps it driving forward. Many of the characters that inhabit this world are akin to those of Souls, but remember that this is a story of factions, disjointed and collapsing families, and our drive for the Elden Throne. On the surface, things appear to be very similar, but they stray where it counts. Late game is probably the worst in any Soulsborne game. Feels like all they did was make enemies do more damage. Just felt lazy. Well, no. If all they did was make the enemies do more damage, then we'd be in Limgrave 2 fighting random undead who happened to one-shot you. We got beautiful new locations, haunting story developments, cool-ass characters, and some of the best areas in the game with places like Farum Azula. Perhaps you think the enemies do too much damage and spam too much, but that's a complaint about the enemies, not about literally everything else in the game. I hate when people get annoyed about one thing so badly that everything has to be bad or lazy. And you really think it's worse than the ending of Dark Souls 2 where you... Okay, I'm not going to get into it. No Dark Souls 2 bashing this video. There is no way you actually believe this in the way that you phrased it. The PvP community are massive crybabies. I mean, you said it, not me, you know what I'm saying? Elden Ring's balance is off. Some builds are 10 times better than others. Also, the bosses in this game are generally worse than they were in Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and Sekiro. Okay, so this was 9 months ago, when the balance was worse. But, I mean, isn't this just a byproduct of the behemoth scale of this game? It's not really possible to make it filled with spirit summons and hundreds of builds and weapons, and have it be perfectly balanced for all playstyles. Thankfully, since this comment was posted, there has been adjusting to builds, such as nerfing Rivers of Blood and buffing Colossal Swords, but I expect there to be some imbalances with such a hefty system. This isn't the limited weapon amount of Bloodborne, to say the least, or the one weapon of Sekiro. The mini-dungeons weren't that bad. Most of them had some clever twists and were generally a welcome sight. I don't think saying they weren't that bad is much of a hot take, because I don't think many people would say that they were actively horrendous. But I think they did get a bit tedious over time. That being said, they are so blatantly optional and there for people who want to be completionists that I don't think there's anything really that wrong with that. There's a limited amount of resources and time that can go into developing a game, and I'm not upset they spent more time developing the more interesting sections of the world. It's actually good that the bosses have combo branches based on your positioning. This helps make them more dynamic and really exciting to fight. I don't really have too strong of an opinion on this, so how about you guys let me know what you think down below. I know this is a divisive topic. I think it does add some spice, but a few times in the fights, it can be a little bit frustrating. I definitely didn't expect it to just be the pure flow of Dark Souls 3 all over again, so I'm glad that they made some ambitious changes though. The vast majority of the optional mini-dungeons are repetitive and boring with recycled boxes, lackluster design, and generic rewards. FromSoft could have done a better job spreading out some story or gameplay gimmicks throughout them so they were a bit less samey and monotonous. I mean, they could have, but would I really have been cool with waiting another few months for that? Not really. The rewards thing, I'll get into that in a bit too. The Elden Ring Remembrance bosses are the best in the series, and it's not close. Oof, this is definitely getting close to boiling. I guess I do have to remember that this is without Elden Ring having any DLC, so if we're talking base games from FromSoft, Elden Ring would definitely be up there for bosses. I don't think I'd say it's not close to the other games though. That's ambitious. Radahn is a mid-tier boss. Not sure if this is that big of a hot take, but I've fought and beat him before his nerf, and now that I fought him recently, he feels like he's been neutered. I mean, I definitely don't have Radahn in my top few bosses of the game, but I would not say he's mid-tier. He is definitely a great boss, but he's also definitely outclassed by some others. He has the coolest build-up and set piece generally, so that gives him huge bonus points, but I can see where you're coming from. I don't think the nerf has to do with it. I think he is just pretty easy, unless you beeline it straight to his fight. But that's kind of the beauty of the game, is you basically get to pick your difficulty. Elden Ring has a lifeless, boring open world. For a Souls game where civilization still exists and there are so many factions, I was hoping to see at least a camp or two being sieged by someone who's not the player. And I'm not going to read the whole comment, but Celeste Trinity replied with a pretty good answer showing a lot of examples of these sieges and skirmishes and action throughout the game. But I'd also like to add that even the boss event against Radahn felt like a real living civilization type of event. It really brought me back to Skyrim, but better. Okay, so what are a couple of my hot takes? Okay, first we'll go back to that exploration thing. People crying about the exploration rewards is omega cringe. It's about the joy of the journey anyways, of which FromSoft has made it incomparably immersive and dynamic. And it's up to you to opt into the 20th catacomb or not anyways. But even so, people are like, I'm not doing a mage build, wah. Okay Karen, but did you consider that you could now if you wanted to, because respecking is so damn easy in this game and you have all these new awesome spells that you could try out? If this was Demon Souls, then maybe you'd have a point, but sheesh, just respec already. Another is balancing combat perfectly around spirit summons and solo play with so many different combat styles is just impossible. You gotta pick one FromSoft, and that's not really even a hot take. Another one is replayability is very slightly damaged by the size of the game. In previous titles, I could just be like, hey, I really liked the insert boss here, and I would really like to face them again. Oh boy, I'll do another playthrough. But in this game, it's a long time to get all the way from the starting point to Lich Dragon Fortisax or Placidusax, for example. The scale can be a bit overwhelming, but I wouldn't trade that in place of more replayability. Maybe a boss rush mode is necessary, like in Sekiro. And the last one is that Elden Ring is by far the most impressive FromSoft game by a mile, technically and in terms of the sheer amount of amazing fights, amazing OSTs, and jaw-dropping encounters and scenery. And that was that. Elden Ring hot takes, distilled down to bite-sized chomps for your viewing entertainment. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more videos. And remember, 95% of you aren't subscribed, so get on it, boys. I'm trusting in you. Thank you for watching. Peace.